Hello, today I will be doing the mid-year book Freakout tag, and I was tagged by Erica Reads Books. If you're not subscribed to Erica's channel, definitely go check her out. She's actually also from Perth, and she does these great videos where she wraps up the last 5 books that she's read, and she reads a lot of literary fiction, but also a bunch of other genres as well, so her wrap-ups are always really interesting. So first question is, best book you've read so far in 2019? This definitely has to be Normal People. It's the only book so far this year that I've given 5 stars to, and as I mentioned in my last wrap up, it's just the type of book where you barely feel like you're reading it. You're just so engrossed with the story and with Sally Rooney's writing. Question 2 is best sequel you've read so far in 2019, and this question made me realize that I've not actually talked about the fact that I finished the Del Toro Quest series a few months ago. I think the last time I talked about reading this series, I was reading the second series, and I think it was in May that I finished off this third series and absolutely devoured these books. I feel like this series just gets better and better as it goes along. I think Emily Rodda's writing gets more interesting and her stories get more involved. Although I remembered the massive twist at the end, it was still so exciting to read. I really would highly recommend this series for anyone who enjoys children's fantasy novels. They really brought back the feeling that made me so addicted to reading when I was a kid, of like staying up late and having to finish another chapter because what was going on in the book was just so exciting. Question 3, a new release you haven't read yet but want to. I really want to read Boy Swallows Universe by Trent Dalton. This is an Australian book that I've heard so much about, and I've heard this both on Booktube and in sort of the general book community in Australia as well. So I have it on request from my library. I think I'm about 20 in the queue, so I probably won't get to it for a few months yet. Question 4, most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and this has to be The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, which I believe comes out in September, so not too much more time to wait. I was maybe a little bit skeptical when I heard that this book was coming out, as it is a sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, and I just think The Handmaid's Tale is such a perfect piece of fiction as a one-off book. What I love the most about it is that it is so self-contained, and I've never been particularly interested in finding out more about June's story, and even with the TV series, which is obviously expanded on the book, I was not that into the second series, and this third season I've stopped watching it halfway through because I'm mostly finding it kind of boring, but I will of course read anything Margaret Atwood writes, so I definitely will be buying this when it comes out. Question 5, biggest disappointment. For me, this was Eileen by Ottessa Moshfegh. Not because I thought the book was that bad, but just because I enjoyed my year of rest and relaxation so much that I had, I guess, high expectations which weren't realized when reading this book. Question 6, biggest surprise. This was probably rereading Northanger Abbey and discovering how much I actually love this book. I guess in my head the list I have of which Austen books are my favourite, Northanger Abbey was never at the top, but I just adored the reading experience with this novel, and especially compared to my reading experience of Sense and Sensibility, which I won't get into because I'll talk about that book in my July wrap up, but that was a book that I thought was probably one of my favourites, and it's turned out that I did not enjoy it as much as I thought I would, definitely compared to how much I enjoyed Northanger Abbey. Question 7, favourite new author. Well, this just has to be Sally Rooney. I find it really interesting that, just going by the plots of her novels, they did not intrigue me at all, which is why it took me a little while to get to them. I guess partly because romance is something that I often find super cliched in a lot of stories, but Sally Rooney has found a way to be entirely original about what she is writing, and because she's someone who's not that much older than me, I feel like hopefully I'll be able to continue reading along with her novels as she writes them throughout our whole lifetimes, I guess. And I'm really excited to read novels by someone who is kind of aging similarly to the way that I'm aging, and to see how she reacts to things that are happening in the world that I'm also, I guess, reacting and experiencing in the world. Question 8, newest fictional crush. For this I picked Claudine from Claudine at School by Colette. Although I don't think this is the best novel ever written, I absolutely adored Claudine, and I really want to read the rest of the series, except they're not in my library, so I have to buy them, and I'm such a stingy person that I just haven't done that yet. But I loved her voice, and I loved the way that Colette was able to write from Claudine's first person perspective, but still give us a really clear view of who this character character is, including the things that she probably doesn't admit to herself. But I also have to give a shout out to Mr. Tilney for knowing Muslin. I just can't get over the fact that Jane Austen thought that the perfect hero for her heroine was a guy who took an interest in stereotypically female pursuits, and I feel like that was kind of Jane Austen's way of being able to say that this guy is a feminist. Question 10, a book that made you cry, and that has to be Seven Little Australians by Ethel Turner, which is the only book that has made me cry so far this year, mostly because I just don't cry at books that much. But even though I knew it was coming, Judy's death affected me so much. I was quite surprised at how emotional I got when I was reading something that I've read before and absolutely knew was going to happen when I started reading the book. Question 11, a book that made you happy. This is of course A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. The whole reading experience of this book was a pure delight, especially because it's one of my favorite books from when I was a child, and I was so pleased to find that it has the same effect on me as an adult as it did back then. And even though a lot of horrible things happen to the main character, I just still find it an amazing sort of escapist fantasy in a way. Question 12, favorite book to film adaptation you saw this year. The only one I could think of that I really enjoyed was Ella Enchanted, which I watched for the first time this year. This is obviously an adaptation of the story of Cinderella, and like, I was aware of the film and I'd probably seen bits of it on TV, but I'd never actually sat down and watched it, and I found it really funny and engaging and surprisingly feminist. Pretty much not at all what I was expecting from that film. So yeah, would definitely recommend Ella Enchanted for just a fun good time. Question 13, favorite video you've done this year. This has to be the Booktube Top Tens Tag video that I did a few weeks ago. I really enjoyed coming up with a selection of 10 books that mean a lot to me and being able to remember little stories about each book. I think especially because I'm always talking about new books that I've read on this channel, it's really lovely to go back and talk about books that I know I will enjoy for my whole life, and talk a bit about books that are the reason why I enjoy reading in the first place. Question 14 is the most beautiful book that you've bought this year. I think this cover probably is my favorite of ones that I bought. This is Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day by Winifred Watson, and the front is a painting, so it wasn't exactly created for the novel, but I just think it really suits the novel and kind of matches the illustrations inside as well. But I also really love this copy of Persuasion that I bought this year. I love all these vintage classic versions of Jane Austen's books, but I especially love the Persuasion one. It really evokes the nautical vibes of the story. Last question is, what book do you need to read by the end of the year? I would very much like to finish Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy if I can. I'm only 100 pages in, and it's a book that I'm reading in between other novels because it is way too heavy to carry on public transport. I wasn't quite sure about it at first until the character of Anna Karenina actually rocks up, and then I started getting really engaged because she is a great character, which makes sense considering it is such a famous book. This version is 963 pages long, so I've got about 863 pages to go. I'm sure I can manage to read that many pages in, what is it, 5 months we've got until the end of the year. So that's the end of the tag. Thank you so much, Erica, for tagging me. I've left this a little bit late. It's not really mid-year anymore, and we're definitely heading towards the last quarter of the year very fast, which is terrifying. So I won't tag anyone, but if you're watching and you want to do this tag, consider yourself tagged by me. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!